So few public figures have spoken out against Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, and that includes here in Britain, despite the British government's complicity in arming and facilitating that genocide. One exception is Gary Lineker, longtime footballer and beloved sports presenter, and a household name for many decades, and he's been vilified for it, not least for sharing my own content on the genocide. I'll come on to that. First of all, let's hear him being interviewed by Amal Rajan, who I should say used to be my boss when I was at The Independent. That was the newspaper, The Independent. Let's have a listen.
You could be partial.
I know where I stand on this. I'm sorry. It's more important than what the BBC, what's going on there is, the mass murder of thousands of children is probably something that we should have a little opinion on.
But the BBC as a whole needs to be impartial about it.
Why? It needs to be factual.
It needs to be impartial about a conflict, doesn't it? And it's hard.
Does it have to be? It wasn't impartial about Ukraine and Russia.
And you might say that
Why does it have to be impartial about? I understand if it's partial about our government and things in this country and everything like that, but something that's going on that far away, why does it?
Because the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza, and by the way, I'm not here as an advocate of the Israeli government, but the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza is a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Israelis on October the 7th. And
which was awful, which was truly awful.
And that full context needs to be there when discussing what's going on.
But that's not the full context, is it? Because the full context starts way before October the 7th, doesn't it?
It sounds like you think the BBC is in a complete mess on impartiality.
No, I don't think the BBC is in a mess. I think the BBC it's very difficult for the BBC. I think the BBC generally does a really good job of it, but it's not always easy. I think facts are the most important thing that they, it's like that old thing, isn't it? If it's raining outside, you don't need someone's opinion to say it's not raining. What you want to see is actually what is the weather outside. So I understand why it's so difficult for the BBC, and it really is. And I feel for the people at the top because, the amount of lobbying that will be going on and from people with, that aren't very impartial must be immense.
In the words of the award-winning journalist Richard Sanders, this is absolutely humiliating. Amal Rajan, who as presenter on the Today programme, has one of the most powerful jobs in British media, lectured on basic journalism by a man whose job is to talk about football. Rajan's comments encapsulate everything that is wrong with the BBC's coverage of Gaza. Impartiality doesn't involve identifying two political positions and coming down halfway between them. As Gary Lineker has to point out to him, it's to do with facts. A few things. Amal Rajan said the BBC was required to offer context, and that included, to quote him, the Israeli position is that what's happening in Gaza is a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Israelis on October 7th. Okay, very straightforward question here. Would he have said Hamas would argue that what happened on 7th October is a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Palestinians? After all, in 2023 alone, prior to 7th October, 240 Palestinians, including more than 40 children, had been killed. Thousands and thousands of Palestinians had been killed, for example, between 2008 and 2023, obviously going beyond that, before that, but we're talking about vast numbers of people. And over the years, tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians had been detained, kidnapped. Not just those I'm talking about who were put through kangaroo military courts with trials headed by judges who also happened to be Israeli soldiers, with those trials lasting minutes and being conducted in Hebrew, including with confessions signed under pressure and indeed often under torture, with reports, indeed testimonies of sexual abuse, as well as torture, coming from children, as Save the Children revealed in a report before 7th of October. The conviction rate is over 99%. Should be noted that children, as I say, are put through these absurd trials because Israel is the only state on earth which routinely tries children in military courts. I'm not just referring to these kangaroo courts. I'm referring to what's called administrative detention, where Israel can detain Palestinians, including children again, without trial or charge. Again, kidnapping them in the middle of the night from their families without them being told what for, including then putting them somewhere without the knowledge or their families knowing where they happen to be. So as it happens, Hamas did argue that 7th of October was, to paraphrase Amal Rajan, a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Palestinians. I bet everything I have that Amal Rajan would object to that argument on the grounds that Hamas committed war crimes on 7th of October, which no context can justify and therefore that context is taken away and not used as context by the BBC. And so we are back once again at that brilliant adage. Nothing can justify 7th of October, but everything can be justified by 7th of October. After all, there's no question that war crimes were committed on 7th of October. There is also no question that Israel's war crimes since are far, far, far deadlier, far, far, far more destructive, far, far, far more systematic, that they have happened every single day now for 564 days, that they are within the context of an overall crime, which is the illegal occupation of Palestinian land, and these are crimes facilitated by our own governments, which include the British government, which the BBC is supposedly there partly to scrutinise. Now, the obvious response to me here is, well, the BBC isn't endorsing Israel's official position there, Owen. It's just offering it up as context. No, the BBC is saying that this is a credible and legitimate argument. It does not believe this is a credible and legitimate argument when made by Hamas. That is not offered up equally as context. Now, as the former BBC presenter, Karishma Patel, brilliant former journalist, well, she's a current journalist, but a former BBC journalist, she resigned from the Corporation over Gaza. She put it like this: impartiality has become an excuse for poor journalism, for imposing false balance and washing one's hand of the back-breaking work of following the evidence. I saw this firsthand while I was in BBC newsrooms. Controversial story areas, Gaza, migration, were subjected to this 50-50 debate format because few were brave enough to reach evidence-based conclusions about what's actually going on and who's culpable. BBC News, it's time to stop hiding behind this neutral observer myth and start doing the work. Gary Lineker gets it. The key point Lineker puts here is that famous phrase about journalism: if someone says it's raining and another person says it's dry, it's not your job to quote them both. Your job is to look out the fucking window and find out what is true. Countless statements of genocidal and criminal intent issued by Israeli leaders and officials, not reported on by the BBC, let alone their coverage shaped around these statements as revealing the nature and intent of what Israel is doing. Israeli statements repeatedly treated as credible when their denials and all the rest of it of atrocities, despite Israel's long history of deceit. The horrors of 7th of October, described as such, complete with emotive words like massacre, not so, with the far, far greater numbers of atrocities committed against Palestinians since. Multiple atrocities not even reported on. Far greater weight attached to Israeli life than Palestinian life barely given any worth. We could go on. As for that comparison made by Lineker as regards Russia and Ukraine, let's just listen to this as an example.
Okay, well, Ina, thank you very much for just sharing your thoughts and your understanding of what is potentially in that deal. Ina Sofson joining us from Kyiv, as Ina was saying, fighting continuing, of course. So our thoughts are with you.
So our thoughts are with you. Has a BBC presenter ever said this when interviewing a Palestinian in a conflict zone? No. Palestinian guests are instead routinely interrogated and treated practically as though they're in the dock. The fact is, the BBC has not stuck to the facts or impartiality. It has airbrushed the genocide and erased the facts. Gary Lineker has told the truth here and has far more journalistic integrity than BBC management. I would know, by the way, that Gary Lineker was embroiled in a firestorm back in November 2023 because he shared a clip of my interview with Raz Sigal, an Israeli-American associate professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, adding simply, worth 13 minutes of anyone's time. The Times newspaper reported this at the time with the headline, BBC staff's anger after Gary Lineker shares Israel-Gaza genocide video. One paragraph read as follows: the post caused dismay among BBC staff. One raised concerns that it would be bloody awful for any Jewish colleagues to have to work with Lineker. It's pretty shit for any Jew having to work with quite a few folk here right now, they added. Here was a classic example of the absurdity of conflating Israel with Jewish people. Because what was being argued there is it would be a trauma for Jewish people to work with Gary Lineker because he shared the thoughts of a Jewish Israeli expert in Holocaust and genocide studies when discussing the actions of a foreign state. Absolutely preposterous. The truth is, actually, so many public figures know a terrible evil is being committed and they have chosen not to speak out about it because they're scared. History will damn them, just as it will praise the likes of Gary Lineker. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts and your comments. Help us take on the pro-genocide and genocide facilitating media. Just call them what they are. That's what they've done. Facts are facts. That's me being impartial. But you can help us do so at patreon.com/, OwenJones84. That's how we've expanded our operation across every different social media platform. It's all down to you. We wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. Leave your comments, listen to the podcast, like, subscribe, all the rest of it. I'll speak to you in a bit.